Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to bring you my first wrap up of 2022. It still feels so weird for me to say 2022. I keep wanting to say 2021. Here we are. I'm going to talk about the first 17 books that I read so far this year. It's actually pretty good that I read 17 books in the last couple of weeks because one of the books was over 1,000 pages and I've been slowly working my way through it the last couple of weeks. So the fact that I was able to read 17 books is pretty amazing. So let's just go ahead and jump right on into it. So the first two books that I have to talk about, I did discuss at length in my very last Vlogmas vlog. I think it's Vlogmas week 5. I will link that up in the cards above if you want to check that out. But the first book is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is such a hyped up literary fiction novel that also has a very strong romance, and I do want to point out that there is an HEA or a happily ever after. I know that I am very concerned when going into books that have romances that are not romance novels because an HEA is not a guarantee, right? But yes, they do end up together. It just doesn't happen until like the very last page. You gotta work for it. But this is a second chance romance about these two authors. We see that they fell in love when they were teenagers. They end up being separated for reasons, and then when they are adults, they are now both successful authors. They come back together. This book is so hyped up. I was so excited about it, but unfortunately I gave it 3.5 stars. I didn't hate it at all. I mean, obviously I would have given it a lower rating if I did, but my problem is that I adored the entire first half. I thought it was just perfect. I loved it so much. The second half for me, the romance was just not as engaging for me. I didn't feel as emotionally attached to the two main characters for some reason. I can't really explain why. I also feel like the pacing slowed down so much, and I started getting bored and I started zoning out while listening to the audiobook. So basically for those reasons, that's why I gave it 3.5 stars. I would still recommend that you check it out because clearly I have the unpopular opinion. Most people have given this 5 stars, so I would still recommend checking it out for yourself. The next book that I read was Party Favors by Erin McClellan. Again, I did talk about this in that vlog that I mentioned. I gave this one 3 stars. I hate that I started off the year with 2 3-star reads, but it is what it is. This is technically book 4 in Erin McClellan, so over the holidays novella series. I love Erin McClellan, clearly because I featured one of her novellas in my top 10 romance novellas of 2021. I'll link that up in the cards above. That one was Bottle Rocket, which is book 2 in this same series. Clearly I'm a fan of hers. This one I felt like was like a little too low angst. I mean, there was angst, but I feel like the romance just wasn't like interesting enough. I don't know. This one's a sapphic romance, and it also centers around New Year's Eve, which is really fun and exciting. And of course, typical of Erin McClellan, there are toys featured in the sex scenes, and we love that. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like the pacing was also slow the entire time, and given that this is a novella, I shouldn't have zoned out as much as I did while reading this. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. It is what it is. I am happy to say though that my third book of 2022 was a 5-star read. I am so excited about this book. This is The Devil and the Heiress by Harper St. George. This is technically book 2 in her The Gilded Age Heiresses series. I personally don't have an interest in reading book 1 just because I've heard so many mixed reviews. A lot of people have given that book like 3 stars, and I don't feel the need to read a 3-star book. But this one has gotten much more positive reviews, and so I was really excited, especially because this does take place during the Gilded Age in London. I don't think that I've ever read a historical romance that takes place in London during the Gilded Age. I've definitely read ones that take place in New York because of Joanna Shoup, but yeah, so that was a refreshing setting to see. And so this is about Violet, our main character. She is a rebellious yet innocent American heiress. Her family is American, and so they've been living in London, and book 1 was about her older sister, I believe, and her romance with a duke. But Violet's parents are planning for her to marry this one guy. She doesn't want to marry him, and so she decides to run away, and she really wants to become a published author. And then we have Christian, our hero. He is an earl. He's always felt this attraction to Violet, but he has a scheme going on of his own. Basically, he wants to convince Violet to marry him because she is an heiress and he needs money to rebuild his Scottish estate. So he thinks that if he escorts her himself on her runaway scheme, that he could get close to her and convince her to marry him. Meanwhile, he falls in love with her. This is a travel / forced proximity romance. So I loved this from page 1. I loved the dynamic between Violet, who, like I said, is this innocent yet rebellious heiress who wants to be an author, and Christian, who is this seemingly just depraved English nobleman. I thought it was a very engaging plot, very, very well paced. My Goodreads review of this is literally just a checklist of everything that I loved about this book, so definitely go check out my Goodreads if you're curious. There's so much chemistry between these two characters. There's the perfect amount of steamy scenes for their story. I also love that there's caretaking involved because they do end up getting into a carriage accident. Also acts of service as the grand gesture. So good. There's also marriage of convenience and marriage in trouble vibes towards the end. Like, this just ticked so many boxes for me and I cannot recommend it highly enough. Next up, we have my first Jessica Cain novella of the year. This is Tutoring the Delinquent by Jessica Cain. And I'm laughing while talking about this book because I can't tell you the last time that I laughed this hard while reading a book in general. Oh my god. This book was freaking hilarious because the basic premise is that this is a new adult romance, which I adore Jessica Cain's new adult romances. It takes place in college. We have our hero Teddy and our heroine, I can't remember her name because she just wasn't that significant, but basically the heroine has to tutor Teddy, the hero, who is the football star at their college. He immediately falls in love with her upon laying his eyes on her, which is very typical of Jessica Cain, but he is literally the most insane Jessica Cain hero, or just the most insane hero I've ever read about in a romance novel. Oh my god. I mean, not only is he like crazily possessive and obsessive of the heroine, which again, that's typical of Jessica Cain, but he like literally should be committed. He is insane. There is something that happens during the third act breakup scene, and I don't want to spoil it because I feel like just read it, but there's something that happens during the third act breakup that Teddy does that I yelled and cackled when it happened, and I probably wasn't supposed to, but clearly I'm dying, right? Oh my god, it was so freaking funny. And so for that reason alone of just entertaining me so much, I gave this 4 stars, but also like it was well paced and all of that, but like this was so freaking crazy. Oh my god. Like, I don't think I will ever forget this novella because of just how crazy Teddy was. Next up, we have When You Were Everything by Ashley Woodfolk. So I was really excited about this book because the basic premise surrounds a friendship breakup, which is something that I don't think I've ever read a book that centers solely on that before. I've read especially YA books where there just so happens to be a friendship breakup, but it's more about maybe a romance or something else. But like this book is truly all about this friendship breakup, though there is a romance that Cleo, our main character, has. But yes, we have Cleo and Layla. They had been friends for a long time. They are now in high school. The book starts when it's been 27 days since Cleo and Layla's friendship imploded. And so Cleo is now dealing with that grief of the loss of this friendship, especially now that she still sees Layla around school. And so it's really interesting because this does have a lot of like time jumping. We'll see the present where they are not friends anymore, and then we jump to the past where they were still friends, and we see the development of how the friendship breakup happened. I just thought that this was so well done. I gave it 4 stars. If you are someone like myself who has gone through a friendship breakup, I think that you would relate to this story a lot. I really like how the end of this blurb, it says, alternating between timelines of then and now, When You Were Everything blends past and present into an emotional story about the beauty of self-forgiveness, the promise of new beginnings, and the courage it takes to remain open to love. I think that perfectly sums up Cleo's journey because she also goes through times where she's just beating herself up about the things that she did to cause the friendship breakup. Even though both her and Layla hurt each other, she's just beating herself up about what she did. And, you know, she's also finding it hard to make new friendships because she feels that she's broken in some way and she doesn't trust people anymore. And so, yeah, it's a really great novel. I definitely want to read more, especially YA books about friendship breakups, because I'm fascinated by the subject matter, and since I've gone through it myself, I definitely relate to these stories a lot. So next up we have The Obsession by Jessie Q. Sutanto. So this is a YA thriller that is written by the same author that wrote Dial A for Aunties, which is a very, very different book. That is an adult fiction rom-com, like very, very different. And this is a bonkers, very serious YA thriller. And so I was just very intrigued about that, like how this author could write two very different genres. And I think for the most part, she did a really good job with this. I think I gave this 4 stars. This is kind of the YA version of You by Caroline Kepnes, or the Netflix adaptation. So if that appeals to you at all, I think that you would really enjoy this. So this is about our 2 main characters, Logan and Delilah. They go to this private elite school. Logan immediately becomes obsessed with Delilah upon seeing her for the first time. There's a lot of stalking involved. He does eventually introduce himself to her and they start dating, but things go very wrong very quickly, not only in that relationship, but also in Delilah's life. There is a murder that happens pretty early on in this book that I definitely did not see coming. Oh my God, there's actually 2 murders that happen in this book that I was just like, wait, what is happening? So there's a lot happening in Delilah's life and in terms of this relationship with Logan, who she does discover is stalking her. So it's definitely not a healthy relationship at all. This book is truly a roller coaster ride. If you want a book that is just bonkers and crazy and will not let up until the final page, I think that this would be a good one to go with. I personally was not a fan of how the author chose to end this book. However, there is something that happens towards the end that I didn't particularly agree with. I think she could have gone in a different direction. It is what it is. And then the very, very end felt very abrupt. There was no closure about anything, in my opinion. So that was just kind of frustrating and confusing. So because of that, I did give this 4 stars, but I still enjoyed it. Next up we have I'm Only Wicked with You by Julie Ann Long. This is book 3 in her Palace of Rogues series, which is a series that I have really been enjoying. I loved book 2 so much that I featured it in my top 10 historical romances of 2021. I will link that video up in the cards if you are interested. But this one is about Hugh, who is an American self-made man, and then Lilias, who is a British heiress. They are both staying at the Grand Palace on the Thames, which is the boarding house that this whole series centers around. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I think I definitely enjoyed the first half more than the second half. I also just didn't love either of these main characters. Like, they were just fine for me. Like, everything about this book just felt fine, which is definitely disappointing because, like I said, I loved book 2 and I really enjoyed book 1 of this series. So it was surprising for me that I didn't enjoy this as much as I wanted to, but you know, it is what it is. And actually I did end up reading book 4 of this series, which I'll get into in a little bit, and I ended up adoring that. So this series has been kind of hit or miss for me. Next up, I read 3 novellas by Cassie Mint in a row. All 3 of these are a part of her Winter Warmer series. What I really love about Cassie Mint is that she has these different novella series that they're all standalones, but they center around a certain theme. So the Winter series obviously centers around different winter scenarios. And so this first one that I read is Thin Ice. She is actually a pair skater. She has a partner that she skates with. And we do find out throughout the novella that he's attracted to her as well, but she doesn't see him that way. However, the romance is with their coach. So there's a little bit of an age difference. I think there's like about 10 years difference between the 2 of them. So it's definitely a bit taboo because he is her coach. But something that I am adoring about Cassie Mint, especially these 3 novellas in particular, is the way that she writes mutual pining and longing. It is absolutely everything. And the fact that she can write these romances so well in only about 60 to 70 pages is incredible in my opinion. So yeah, this was just great. I love figure skating romances. If you have more recommendations for them, I've already read From Lukov with Love, but if you have more recommendations, definitely leave those in the comments below. The next one I read was Snowstorm. This one is a forced proximity slash snowed in romance. Our heroine, who is in England for university, and a duke. She ends up getting trapped at his estate because she was with a tour group and the tour group left her and she's just stuck there because of the snow. This was just so good as well. Again, the mutual pining is just great. And also these novellas have the perfect amount of steam. So good. Gave all 3 of these 5 stars. I don't know if I already said that. But then the third one that I read is The Gift. This one is about our couple who live in this very isolated village in the Arctic, and our hero is a scientist. Our heroine is a post office worker who delivers mail to the research facility that the hero works at. We see that they have been pining for each other for years at this point. That was actually the same thing with Thin Ice, that the heroine and the coach had been pining for each other for a long time, and I love that as well. That's just such a great trope. This one's just really fun. It's called The Gift because this takes place around Christmas time, and so the heroine decides to give herself to the hero for Christmas, and yeah, it's just really great. I can't recommend all 3 of these highly enough, and now I like need to read everything that Cassie Mint has written. I did read like 8 or so of her novellas in 2021, and now I'm just dying to read more. Next up, I read The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Leese. Yes, this is a Christmas romance. I had not planned on reading this, but it just kind of unexpectedly became available from my library, from my Libby app. And so this is a pretty short romance. It's only like 5 hours, the audiobook, and this is an enemies to lovers romance between Jonathan and Gabby, who work at this independent bookstore together. And this is just the perfect slow burn enemies to lovers romance. It's kind of crazy to me how Chloe Leese made this slow burn work, because like I said, this is a very short book in comparison to most romance novels, but by the end, I was just like dying for them to finally get together, and when they finally do, it is so satisfying. This was perfect. It also has a very much You've Got Mail inspired plot. It's everything. I adore Chloe Leese with my whole heart. There is also autism, demisexual, and chronic illness representation, and I just loved it so much. Next up, we have Counting Down with You by Tashi Boyan. I was so excited about this book because it is a YA fake dating romance, which immediately gives me vibes of To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. But this one is about our main character, Karina. She is Bangladeshi. She has very overbearing parents. Her parents decide to go visit Bangladesh for an entire month, and so while her parents aren't really in the picture, she decides that it would be the perfect opportunity for her to live her life more, basically. In the meantime, there is this guy Ace, who is a bad boy. He's not really a bad boy, but Karina's, I think, English teacher, yes, asks her to tutor him. And so over the next 28 days or so that her parents are away, she starts tutoring Ace. They start spending a lot of time together, start falling for each other, and yeah, things just go on from there. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars because while I was reading this, I was really enjoying it, but the second I finished it, there were a lot of sort of red flags that kept popping up in my mind, and as I was reading other readers' reviews, just, I don't know, more issues started popping up. Here are my 2 main issues. One, Ace, our hero, our love interest, he's just a little too perfect, which I don't normally have a problem with perfect heroes by any means. But also I realized upon reflection after reading this that some of the things he would say to Karina were just like a little too cheesy and cringy. It was just kind of odd. And then also a big problem that I have with this book upon reading Own Voices reviews, so reviews from Muslim readers, is that I do not like the way that this author painted most of the adults in this book, especially most of the adults in Karina's family. Namely, her parents are written as like these one-note, one-dimensional villains, and a lot of the adults in her family are painted that way, and it just comes across as if like all Muslim parents are overbearing and terrible. Like I just don't appreciate that. I don't know, it definitely rubs me the wrong way. I understand that this book is based a lot off of Tashi's own experiences, and I can't discount that at all. I just felt a little weird about that. Also, another pretty big issue I had with this story is the ending. I literally read the ending like 5 times to make sure that I fully understood what was happening, but a really big issue in this book is that Karina's parents would never support her being in a relationship with a white boy. However, at the end of the book, she's still secretly dating him. She never says that she ever tells her parents about Ace. So I find that to be so freaking weird that there's no closure about that. They are just secretly dating. Like, what? Like, that's just very, very odd to me. So yeah, for all those reasons, I gave this 3.5 stars. Yeah, I wanted to love this more than I did, but once again, it is what it is. Next up, we have Professor Feelgood by Lisa Raven. This is book 2 in her Mr. Romance series, and I loved book 1. I read that at the very end of 2021, gave that one 5 stars. I gave this one 5 stars as well, but this one just has a very different feel and a very different vibe to it. Our heroine is Asha, who is the sister of the heroine from book 1. Now, we have this character, Professor Feelgood. He is essentially this influencer on Instagram. He basically posts like thirst trap photos, but also like this beautiful poetry about this woman that he was in a relationship with that broke his heart, and he has never gotten over this woman. And so Asha works for a publishing house. She has been obsessed with this Professor Feelgood for years. And so she needs a really great idea to basically solidify her job and to save the publishing house. And so she comes up with this idea of having Professor Feelgood write a book. So she approaches him on Instagram and they start talking. They eventually agree to have him write a book for the publisher that she works for. They meet in person and she realizes that Professor Feelgood is actually Jake, who was her childhood best friend turned enemy. Now they despise each other. And so things go on from there. Now they have to work together on this novel because she is his editor. And this is like the ultimate It's Always Been You, childhood friends to enemies to lovers romance. I loved it so much. Highly recommend. I really don't have much to say about that book than that. I thought it was pretty fantastic. Next up, we have Arctic Fire by Kira Andrews. I've read one book by this author before, which was Kidnapped by the Pirate, which is an MM historical pirate romance. Absolutely loved that one. So I was really looking forward to this as well, though. So this definitely has a very different feel. This is a contemporary romantic suspense romance novella. The audiobook was only like 3 hours, so I flew through this audiobook while mowing the lawn one day. But this is about our 2 main characters. We have Captain Jack. He is in the military. He definitely has PTSD over his experiences in Afghanistan. He has now been sent to this remote village in the Arctic. And then we have Kin, who is a local ranger. And so Ken has the task of guiding Jack through the rough terrain of this area. This does turn into a forced proximity slash snowed in romance, and there's definitely suspense elements as well. Kind of turns into a survival situation towards the very end. This was just very sweet. You know, considering that it's a very short novella, I thought that the pacing of their romance was really well done, and I appreciated that the very end of this was really just the beginning of their relationship. I feel like that made sense for these 2 characters and for their story, so I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really solid. Next up, we have another book by Julie Ann Long. This is After Dark with the Duke, which is book 4 in her Palace of Rogue series. And this book is what I mean when I say that this has been a hit or miss series for me, because I adored this book so much. I loved this almost just as much as book 2, which is Angel in a Devil's Arms. I know that I already mentioned that, but this is about our 2 main characters. We have Mariana. She has now been known as the Harlot of Haywood Street. She is an opera diva who has been brought low by a duel that was fought for her favors. We find out that basically the duel was between this guy that she had an affair with and then this other man that was just giving Mariana a compliment after one of her performances, and her ex-lover was drunk and just gets upset over it and challenges that guy to a duel, and one of the guys gets injured. Like, it's just absolutely insane, and it's something that was totally out of Mariana's control. And so now she has no choice but to come stay at this boarding house, the Grand Palace on the Thames, that this whole series centers around. Then we have James, who is the Duke of Valkirk. His title was given to him because he is essentially a war hero. He is a lot older than Mariana. He's actually 43 and she's 25, though I will say the age gap is not one of the reasons that they can't be together, which I really appreciated. But from the moment that they meet, James just judges the shit out of Mariana because of that whole scandal with the duel and everything like that. And so their relationship starts off with a lot of verbal sparring for sure. They definitely have the wrong idea about each other. And so what I adored about this is the development of this relationship from, like I said, this animosity to this unlikely friendship, because James ends up tutoring Mariana in Italian, because Mariana sings in Italian, of course, as an opera singer, but she doesn't really understand the language. And so yeah, he tutors her, they become friends, they start having these feelings for each other. This becomes a slow burn and tender romance with a lot of vulnerability and passion, and it's beautiful. Oh my goodness. I cried at the end. Julianne Long got me again. I cried during Angel in a Devil's Arms. I cried during this book as well. The ending was amazing. The grand gestures that James did for Mariana, oh my god, I died. It was amazing, so good. So I can't recommend this book highly enough. I am so excited to see what this author does with the Palace of Rogues series going forward. Next up, we have another novella by Jessa Cain. This is King Sized. This is a novella that has been on my TBR for quite some time. A really good friend, Ava from Ava Reads Romance, absolutely adores this novella. I think this might be her favorite Jessa Cain novella. So I was so excited about this one. This is another one of her fantasy romance novellas about Britta, who has just become the queen of her kingdom after her parents have been murdered. And then we have Rex, who is one of her bodyguards. We love a bodyguard romance. Throughout the novella, we see that Rex also has submissive tendencies and Britta is more dominant. And I just adore submissive heroes. Oh my goodness. And it was just done so well here. I did end up giving this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I didn't love it quite as much as other novellas of Jessa Cain's, just because I felt like the pacing was like a little slow, and this was just like a very sweet romance, and there was angst, of course, because Rex is her bodyguard. But I don't know, I just didn't find the romance to be quite as interesting as some of Jessa Cain's other novellas, but yes, I did definitely still enjoy this, so I gave it 4 stars. All right. We are getting to the very last book that I read so far this month. This is the chunky book that I've been working on for the entirety of the first half of this month. Oh boy, this is Manacled by Senlin Yu. This is, I think, over 1,500 pages. I think it's about like 1,600 pages if I'm not mistaken. This is a very long and epic Harry Potter fan fiction. I randomly found out about this from Tiffany from Neverland Pixie on Instagram. I will link her down below. I love Tiffany so much. I low-key, high-key want her to have her own booktube channel because I just love her Instagram, especially like her Instagram stories. She reviews all the books that she reads and I'm just obsessed with her. But anyways, she randomly started talking about this book, and then I started seeing Jen from the Book Refuge, Jessin from Jessin Reads Romance, Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life. Like, it seemed like everybody started reading this fan fiction at the same time, and as soon as I read the premise, I knew that I needed to read it as well. Now, I'm not somebody that reads fan fiction, but now I need to read like all of the Harry Potter fan fiction. I am absolutely obsessed. So this is like the Harry Potter world meets the premise of The Handmaid's Tale. This is very dark. I cannot emphasize that enough. This is one of the darkest things I have ever read in my life. Look up the content warning. So this fan fiction deviates from canon at around Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Basically, we now go into a different timeline and a lot of different things happen than how the actual series played out. So where this fanfic starts, Voldemort has won the war and Harry is dead. Now that the wizarding world has been ravaged by this war, because also in this timeline, the war went on for quite a few years. You know, I think it starts around 1997, maybe 96 or something like that. And in this timeline, it ended in 2003. So a lot of wizards and witches died during this war. So Voldemort enacts this repopulation effort, which is where the Handmaid's Tale premise comes into play. I don't know why this is so hard for me to explain, but basically, right after the war, Voldemort made all of these pure blood witches and wizards marry each other, and he wanted pure blood children, right? But they're finding that a lot of these pure blood couples are having fertility issues. So Voldemort and his government decide to make this program where they take half-blood and mud-blood witches and make them surrogates so that they can carry children for these pure blood couples, right? So our two major characters in this fanfiction are Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. Yes, this is Hermione fanfiction, and going into this, I was definitely skeptical of that pairing. The main reason why I wanted to read this was because of the premise of Harry being dead and this repopulation effort and all of that. So I wasn't convinced about these two characters being together. And I can tell you after reading this 1,500-page book that I feel like they are like the perfect ship. I've always felt that the Hermione-Ron pairing was so freaking forced. And now seeing Draco and Hermione together, it's everything to me. But yeah, this is just a very dark and angsty romance between the two of them, because this starts off with Hermione being Draco's surrogate. Draco has worked his way up in Voldemort's army. He is now the High Reeve. He is basically Voldemort's second in command. So yeah, Draco does terrible things to stay in Voldemort's good graces. He has his motivations and reasons for that. So yeah, basically Hermione is forced into being a surrogate for Draco. Hermione also has a lot of missing memories from the end of the war. And so that's part of the intrigue of this story, is that Draco is a very powerful Legilimens. And so he tries to go through her mind and see what these lost memories are, but he can't crack her mind. I don't even know where to start with this review. I feel like it took me so long to just explain the premise to you guys, and I still feel like I didn't explain it well enough. But first things first, I think the way that Senlin Yu wrote the Harry Potter world and incorporated the Handmaid's Tale premise is just genius, because the way that magic is used on these surrogates is just horrifying and even more sinister than the original Handmaid's Tale. And I loved how, specifically in the flashback part of this story, I love how the war is depicted and how these discussions of how far is too far, like how far would you or should you go to win a war in general. There are a lot of discussions brought up because Hermione truly believes, and honestly, I agree with her, she gets to a point where she truly believes that the Order cannot win the war if they don't start using dark magic as well. And Harry and Ron and everybody else is obviously completely against that. They truly think that they can win this war just by using normal light magic. And Hermione is also a healer for the Order, and so she is seeing all of these people die for this cause, and she's healing all of these people, and basically more than anyone else, she is seeing how they are truly losing this war. There is no way that they can win if they keep going the way that they have been going. And I think that those discussions are so interesting. The way that this war is done, it just felt so realistic to me. And it's also so freaking cool and fascinating to see how Draco comes into play, not only in that present timeline, but throughout all of these flashbacks. We see that he plays a much bigger role in Hermione's life during the war, and it's just, God, it's so good. Like, truly, Draco and Hermione go through it in this story to get to their bittersweet happily ever after, and I couldn't stop reading. This was just so addictive. And yes, like I've established, Draco hurts Hermione a lot throughout this story, and Hermione does hurt Draco back throughout different parts of this story, but I still was rooting for this romance. Like, who am I? Why? Like, how did this author make it work? I don't know. There's also some truly epic scenes in this book. There's some amazing battle scenes. A lot of characters get some really amazing moments. I love the scenes where Draco just goes off if anybody tries to harm Hermione. That's absolutely iconic. Hermione does some truly badass things through the war. There's even a scene where Ginny gets a truly iconic and badass moment of her own. I'm not gonna spoil what that is, but it's absolutely incredible. I am trash for Harry Potter fanfiction now. Like, wow, this was incredible. I can't stress enough how dark it is. If you want to know even more of my thoughts, definitely check out my Goodreads review, because I feel like I'm forgetting things, but that Goodreads review is like the longest review that I have ever done. So that is it for my mid-month wrap-up. I hope that you guys enjoyed. So I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about any of the books that you've been reading this month, or if you want to give me recommendations in general, anything like that. I always love reading comments from you guys. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!